My name is Marianne, and the day they laughed at me was the day my life broke in half. Before I tell you how I walked out with nothing, you need to understand this. What happened next was the most shocking moment of my life. It happened in a room full of people who thought I was weak. People who believed I would crawl back begging. People who had no idea what I was about to become. But before we go there, let me ask you something. If you love emotional and powerful stories like this, please take 1 second to subscribe, like, and turn on your notification bell so you never miss stories that touch the heart. And tell me in the comments, what country are you watching from right now? I want to know who is standing with me as I tell this story. Now listen carefully. The laughter was loud, cruel, sharp. It echoed in my ears as I stood at the door with my old handbag shaking in my hand. My shoes were worn. My dress was plain. My eyes were burning with tears I refused to let fall. "Look at her," one of them said, laughing. "She thinks she can survive on her own," another added. "Give her 1 week," someone else mocked. "She'll be back." They all laughed again. That was the moment. The moment I walked out. I turned the door handle slowly. My heart was beating so fast it felt like it would tear through my chest. Every step toward the door felt like stepping into darkness. I had no money, no home, no plan, just pain, just shame, and just one quiet promise inside my heart. I will never beg you again. I walked out while they laughed behind me. The door slammed shut, and the sound felt like a final goodbye. But what they didn't know, what no one in that room could see, was that walking out was not my ending. It was the beginning of something they never saw coming. Let me take you back. I was not always the woman they laughed at. Once, I was the woman who held everything together. I woke up before everyone else. I cooked. I cleaned. I sacrificed. I stayed quiet when I was hurt. I smiled when I was tired. I gave when I had nothing left. I believed love meant endurance. I believed loyalty meant silence. I believed that if I stayed strong, they would one day respect me. I was wrong. Slowly, respect turned into control. Care turned into commands. Love turned into something cold and sharp. They spoke to me like I was small. Like I was nothing without them. "You should be grateful," they told me. "Without us, where would you be? You can't survive on your own." I started believing them. That is how power is stolen, not with force, but with words whispered every day until you forget who you are. The day everything broke started like any other day. I served breakfast. I cleaned the table. I stood quietly while they talked over me. Then one of them said something that cut deeper than anything before. "You are a burden," they said, looking straight at me. "You don't belong here anymore." The room went silent. I felt something snap inside me. Not anger. Not sadness. Clarity. I looked around the room at faces I had served for years. Faces that felt nothing for me. And I understood something for the first time. Staying was killing me. So I stood up. My hands were shaking, but my voice was calm. "I'm leaving," I said. That is when the laughter started. They laughed because they thought I was joking. They laughed because they thought I was weak. They laughed because they believed they owned my fear. And then I walked out. Outside, the world felt too big. Cars passed. People moved on with their lives. No one knew I had just lost everything. I sat on a cold bench and finally let the tears fall. I cried for the woman I used to be. I cried for the years I gave away. I cried because I was scared. But underneath the fear, something else was growing. Strength. That night, I slept in a place I never imagined I would. I held my bag close like it was my last piece of safety. I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, "They think this is my end." They are wrong. Because even though I had nothing, I still had my mind. My will. My story. And somewhere deep inside me, a power was waking up. A power they never saw coming. But what happened next, the decision I made the very next morning, would change everything. It would lead me down a path none of them could imagine. And when I returned, they would not be laughing anymore. I did not sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard their laughter again. It played in my head like a broken record. Loud, mocking, cruel. My chest felt tight, and my heart kept racing, as if it was afraid to slow down. When morning came, the sky was gray. Cold air brushed against my face as I stepped outside. I had no mirror, but I did not need one to know how I looked. Tired, broken, scared. And yet, alive. I walked with no clear direction. Each step felt heavy, but stopping felt worse. People passed me, some rushing to work, some laughing on their phones. Their lives were moving forward while mine felt paused. I kept asking myself one question over and over. What do I do now? By midday, my legs hurt. My stomach growled so loudly I felt embarrassed, even though no one was listening. I counted the few coins I had left. They were not enough for much. I found a small bench near a busy street and sat down. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let the noise of the city wash over me. That was when doubt crept in. Maybe they were right, a voice inside me whispered. Maybe you can't survive alone. Maybe you should go back. My hands tightened into fists. No. Going back meant more laughter, more control, more slow dying. I stood up again. As I walked, I noticed a small building with a sign in front. The words were simple, but they stopped me in my tracks. Community Skills Center. Free training and support. I stared at the sign for a long time. Free. Support. Training. The door was open. I told myself I was just going to ask questions. Just to look. Nothing more. Inside, the place was quiet but warm. A few people sat at tables, writing or typing. Some looked nervous. Some looked hopeful. All of them looked like they were trying to start over. Just like me. A woman behind a desk looked up and smiled. Good morning, she said gently. How can I help you? Her voice was calm, kind. Not sharp like the voices I was used to. I just need information, I said, my voice shaking. That's okay, she replied. You're welcome here. Those 3 words hit me hard. You're welcome here. No one had said that to me in a long time. She explained the program slowly, as if she could see how fragile I felt. Basic skills. Job training. Small business lessons. Confidence building. Support groups. As she spoke, something stirred inside me. Hope. I signed my name with a trembling hand. Walking out of that building later, I felt lighter than I had in years. Nothing in my life had changed yet, but something inside me had. For the first time since I walked out, I felt like I had taken a step forward instead of running away. The days that followed were not easy. I struggled to wake up early after nights of poor sleep. My body was tired. My mind was full of fear. Sometimes, I wanted to quit before the day even began. But I kept going. I sat in classes with people half my age and people twice my age. I learned slowly. I asked questions even when my voice shook. I failed. I tried again. Every small success felt like a quiet victory. One day, I finished an assignment and stared at it in disbelief. I did this. No one yelled at me. No one laughed. No one told me I was useless. They clapped for me. That night, I cried again, but these tears were different. They were tears of healing. Weeks passed. Something changed in the way I walked. In the way I spoke. My shoulders were no longer always bent forward. My eyes no longer stayed on the ground. I was still struggling, still scared, but I was growing. And then, one afternoon, I saw something that made my heart stop. Across the street, standing outside a shop, was one of them. The same face. The same voice that once laughed at me. For a moment, fear rushed back like a wave. My hands shook. My breath caught in my throat. They had not seen me yet. I could turn away. I could hide. I could disappear like before. But then I remembered the door slamming shut. The laughter. The shame. And I remembered the promise I made to myself. I will never beg you again. I stood still. My heart pounded as they slowly turned, and their eyes locked onto mine. Their smile faded. And in that moment I knew, this was not over. Not even close. For a few seconds, the world went quiet. The noise of the street faded. The cars, the people, the voices, everything disappeared. All I could see was that face across the road. A face I knew too well. A face that once looked at me with laughter and control. My heart slammed against my chest. They stared at me as if they were seeing a ghost. I did not move. I did not wave. I did not smile. I simply stood there. Inside me, two voices began to fight. One whispered, "Run. Hide. Don't let them see you like this." The other said, "Stand still. You are not the same woman anymore." The second voice won. They took a step toward me. Then another. Each step felt like a drumbeat in my ears. "You," they said, their voice full of surprise. "I thought you left," they added quickly, almost laughing again. I noticed something then. The laughter was weak. It did not carry the same power it once did. "I did leave," I replied quietly. There was a long pause. They looked me up and down, as if searching for something. Fear. Shame. Desperation. They did not find it. "Where are you staying?" they asked, pretending to care. I knew that tone. It was not concern. It was control, trying to sneak back in. "I'm fine," I said. "You don't look fine," they replied. "You know you can always come back." The words hit me like cold water. Come back. As if I were a thing that had wandered off. My hands trembled, but I kept my voice steady. "No," I said. "I'm building something." They laughed softly again, but this time it sounded forced. "Building what?" they asked. "You always dreamed too big." That sentence used to crush me. Now it did not. "I have to go," I said, turning away. I walked off before they could say more. With every step, my legs felt lighter. I did not look back. That night, I could not stop thinking. The past had found me. And I knew something now that I had been trying to avoid. If I wanted a new life, I could not just run from the old one. I had to grow stronger than it. The next morning, I walked into the center with a new fire inside me. I started arriving early, staying late, volunteering to help others, asking for extra work, extra lessons. People noticed. "You're very focused," one of the trainers said. "I have to be," I replied. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. I learned how to speak with confidence. How to look people in the eye. How to explain my ideas without shrinking. I learned something even more important. My voice mattered. One afternoon, the trainer asked me to share my story with the group. My stomach twisted in fear. I stood up slowly. My hands shook. "I used to believe I was nothing without the people who controlled me," I began. But I learned something. Everyone was listening. I learned that when people laugh at you, it is often because they are afraid of what you might become. The room was silent. When I finished, people clapped. Some wiped tears from their eyes. In that moment, I felt powerful. Not loud power, but deep, steady power. Life outside the center was still hard. I took small jobs. Long hours. Late nights. Some days, my body hurt so badly I could barely stand. But every dollar I earned felt like freedom. One night, I sat alone counting my savings. It was not much, but it was mine. For the first time, no one could take it from me. Then something unexpected happened. I received a call. The number was familiar. My stomach dropped. I answered slowly. Hello. Why didn't you tell us you were struggling? The voice asked. Struggling. I almost laughed. I'm not struggling, I said. We've been worried, they continued. You don't have to suffer. There it was again. The hook. I'm not suffering, I replied. I'm growing. The line went quiet. You think you're better than us now? They snapped. No, I said calmly. I think I'm better than who I used to be. I ended the call. My hands were shaking, but my heart felt calm. That was the moment I truly understood something. They were losing control. Months later, an opportunity came. A big one. The center announced a project, something that could change lives. A chance to lead, to manage, to show everything we had learned. I hesitated. The old fear returned. What if I fail? What if they laugh again? Then I remembered the door. The laughter. The walk into the unknown. I raised my hand. I want to try, I said. The room went quiet. The trainer smiled. I was hoping you would. That night, as I walked home under the dark sky, I felt it clearly. I was no longer running. I was rising. And soon, very soon, they would see me again. But not as the woman they laughed at. The day I officially stepped into leadership was the day fear returned in a new form. Not the old fear that whispered you are nothing, but a sharper one that asked, what if you fail in front of everyone? I stood in front of the mirror that morning, staring at my reflection. I looked older than I used to, but stronger too. My eyes no longer avoided my own gaze. This is just another step, I whispered to myself. But if I fall, another voice answered. I took a deep breath. Then I fall standing. The project was big. Bigger than anything I had ever touched before. We were meant to create something useful for the community. Something real, something that could help people like me who had been broken down and left behind. I was not just a student anymore. I was the one leading the work. People depended on me. On the first day, I stood in front of the group. My hands trembled, but I kept them still. We will do this together, I said. No one is invisible here. I saw heads nod. I saw fear in their eyes. Fear I recognized. And I knew I could not fail them. The work was exhausting. There were days when nothing went right. Plans fell apart. Supplies went missing. People argued. Deadlines closed in on us. Some nights, I went to bed with my head spinning, wondering if I had made a mistake stepping forward. One afternoon, after a particularly bad meeting, I sat alone in a quiet room and cried. I can't do this, I whispered. Then I remembered the bench. The cold. The hunger. I survived that, I told myself. I can survive this too. I wiped my face and stood up. Slowly, things began to change. I learned how to listen instead of control. How to guide instead of command. How to admit when I did not know something. People started trusting me. You make us feel safe, someone said once. Those words shook me. Safe. No one had ever described me like that before. Then came the twist I did not expect. One evening, as I was packing my things, the trainer approached me with a serious look. There is something you should know, they said. My heart skipped. The project will be presented publicly. I froze. Publicly? I asked. Yes. Leaders from different organizations will be there. Important people. Important people. Faces flashed through my mind. Laughter. Mocking eyes. Familiar voices. What if someone I know is there? I asked quietly. The trainer looked at me closely. Then they will see who you are now. That night, sleep did not come. The days leading to the presentation were filled with pressure. My phone buzzed constantly. Questions. Problems. Doubts. I barely ate. I barely rested. Then, 2 days before the event, something happened that nearly destroyed everything. One of the team members disappeared. With the main materials. Panic spread like fire. People looked at me. "What do we do now?" they asked. For a moment, the old fear rose up again. "They are watching. They will laugh if you fail." I closed my eyes. Then I spoke. "We adapt," I said. "We do not quit. We worked through the night. We rebuilt. We changed plans. We pushed forward with tired hands and hopeful hearts. When the sun rose, we were still standing. The day of the presentation arrived. I stood backstage, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. Then I heard it. Laughter. Familiar laughter. My blood turned cold. I peeked through the curtain. And there they were. The same people who laughed when I walked out. Sitting in the audience. Watching. Waiting. My legs felt weak. "This is it," I whispered. "This is where they laugh again." The trainer placed a hand on my shoulder. "Or this is where they finally listen." My name was called. I stepped forward. The lights were bright. The room was full. I saw their faces clearly now. Some looked bored. Some looked curious. One of them smiled, the same cruel smile from that day. I swallowed hard and began to speak. But before I could finish my first sentence, something unexpected happened. One of them stood up and said my name out loud. The room went silent. Every eye turned to me. And I knew, whatever happened next would change everything. When I heard my name spoken from the audience, my heart nearly stopped. The room felt like it shrank around me. The bright lights above my head suddenly felt hotter. Every face turned in my direction, waiting to see what I would do next. For a moment, I could not move. All the strength I had built over months trembled. I looked toward the voice. It was him. The same person who had laughed the loudest when I walked out. The one who told me I was nothing without them. The one who said I would come crawling back. He stood there confidently, hands in his pockets, smiling like he owned the room. "So," he said loudly, "this is what you're doing now?" A few people laughed softly. Not cruel laughter yet. Curious laughter. But I knew how fast it could turn. My throat felt dry. This was the moment. If I broke now, they would be right. I took a slow breath. "Yes," I said into the microphone. My voice was quiet, but steady. "This is what I'm doing now." He raised an eyebrow. "Interesting," he replied. "Last time we saw you, you could barely stand on your own." The words cut deep. The old me would have lowered her head, apologized, tried to explain. But I did something different. I smiled. Not a wide smile. Not a proud one. A calm one. "That's true," I said. "I was very weak back then." The room went silent. He seemed surprised. "You admit it?" he asked. "Yes," I continued. "I was weak because I was carrying everyone else and forgetting myself." People shifted in their seats. I could feel the energy changing. I looked around the room. "I want to tell you all a short story," I said. "About a woman who walked out of a place where she was laughed at." I did not look at him as I spoke. She had nothing. No money. No plan. No support. Just pain and fear. The room was completely silent now. She was told she would fail. That she would beg to return. I paused. But instead of begging, she learned. I pointed gently toward the project behind me. She learned skills. She learned confidence. She learned her worth. I saw people nodding. She learned that power does not always look loud. Sometimes, power looks like standing back up after being broken. I stopped speaking. For a moment, no one said anything. Then someone clapped. Then another. Soon, the room filled with applause. I felt my chest tighten, not with fear, but with emotion. I turned back to him. I am not here to prove anything to you, I said calmly. I am here to show what is possible when someone is given a chance. His smile faded. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I continued with the presentation. This time, my voice did not shake. I spoke about the project, about the people it would help, about rebuilding lives, about dignity. I spoke from my heart, and people listened. When I finished, the applause was louder than before. I stepped back, my legs weak, my heart racing. But I was standing. He did not clap. Instead, he sat down slowly, staring at the floor. After the event, people approached me. They shook my hand, thanked me, asked questions. One person said, "Your story changed how I see people." Another said, "We need more leaders like you." I felt like I was floating. Then I felt a hand on my arm. I turned. It was him again. Up close, he did not look as powerful as he once did. His eyes were tired. "You surprised me," he said quietly. "I surprised myself too," I replied. He hesitated. "We didn't think you'd last," he admitted. "I know," I said. There was a long silence. Then he said something I never expected. "You left at the worst time for us." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "We struggled after you left," he said. "Things fell apart." I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness, validation, freedom. "I'm sorry," he added, though his voice lacked strength. I looked at him carefully. This was the moment I had dreamed of. The apology. But instead of joy, I felt clarity. "I forgive you," I said. "But I'm not coming back." His shoulders dropped. "I didn't ask you to," he said softly. That night, I walked home with my head held high. The laughter that once haunted me felt distant now. But deep inside, I knew something important. This was not the end. Because power, once discovered, demands more. And the next choice I made would change my life forever. The offer came 3 days later. It arrived quietly, without drama, without applause. Just a simple email sitting in my inbox when I woke up that morning. I almost ignored it. The subject line looked ordinary. Too ordinary to hold the kind of power that could change a life. I made myself a cup of tea, sat on the edge of my bed, and opened it slowly. As I read the words, my hands began to shake. They wanted me. Not as a helper. Not as a student. Not as someone learning. But as a leader. They had seen the presentation. They had heard my story. They believed I could build something bigger, something that reached beyond one center, one group, one room. They wanted me to lead a new initiative. A paid position. A real one. I stared at the screen for a long time, afraid it might disappear if I blinked. This was the kind of opportunity people say comes only once. And suddenly, fear wrapped itself around my chest. What if I accept and fail? What if I am not ready? What if they were right all along? The old doubts tried to rise again. But I remembered the laughter. I remembered the door closing behind me. I remembered the woman who slept on a bench and promised never to beg again. I whispered to myself, "You did not come this far to stop now." I accepted. The first day in my new role felt unreal. I walked into a building with clean floors and quiet offices. People nodded at me with respect. They introduced me as someone important. Important. The word felt heavy. I was given responsibilities, deadlines, expectations. Meetings where people asked for my opinion and waited for my answer. At first, my voice shook. Then it steadied. I listened. I learned. I spoke carefully but honestly. And slowly, something incredible happened. People followed my lead. But growth always comes with resistance. Not everyone was happy about my position. I felt it in the room sometimes. The way certain people avoided my eyes. The way whispers stopped when I walked past. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation. "Why her?" someone asked quietly. "She came from nowhere," another replied. "She doesn't belong here." The words burned. That night, I went home exhausted, not from work, but from carrying the weight of proving myself all over again. I sat alone in the dark and cried. "Why does it never stop?" I whispered. Then I realized something important. Power does not end struggle. It changes it. A few weeks later, I received a call that shook me deeply. It was from someone connected to my past. They had heard about my new role. "People are talking," they said. "You're becoming someone else." I laughed softly. "I hope so," I replied. But then they said something that made my stomach twist. "They are angry. They say you abandoned them. They say you owe them." Owe them. The word felt heavy. That night, memories flooded back. Years of giving. Years of silence. Years of being small so others could feel big. I barely slept. The next day, something happened at work that tested me like nothing before. A major partner pulled out of the initiative. Without warning. Without explanation. Panic spread quickly. Budgets collapsed. Plans froze. People looked at me. "What do we do now?" they asked. I felt the room closing in. This was the moment they would say, "She wasn't ready." I closed my eyes for a second. Then I spoke. "We adapt," I said. Again. I worked late into the night. I made calls. I rewrote plans. I stood firm when others panicked. By morning, we had a solution. Not perfect, but alive. And for the first time, I saw something in the eyes of those who doubted me. Respect. But the greatest test was still coming. Because the success I was building began to attract attention. The kind of attention that travels back to where you came from. One evening, as I left the office, I saw a familiar figure waiting outside. My heart sank. It was one of them again. Standing there, hands folded, face serious. "We need to talk," they said. I did not answer. Because I already knew. Whatever they were about to ask would force me to choose between the life I built and the past that refused to let go. I stopped walking. The evening air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on my shoulders. The street was busy, but in that moment, it felt like there were only two people in the world. Me and the person standing in front of me. "We need to talk," they said again. I looked at their face carefully. Once, this face had power over me. Once, just the sound of their voice could make my hands shake and my heart race. But now, I noticed things I never had before. The tired eyes, the nervous fingers, the uncertainty behind the words. "I don't owe you a conversation," I said calmly. They swallowed. "I know," they replied. "But please. Just a few minutes." I hesitated. Not because I was weak, but because I was strong enough to choose. 5 minutes, I said. We walked to a quiet spot nearby. The noise of the street faded, leaving an uncomfortable silence between us. They spoke first. "Things are bad," they said quietly. "Bad how?" I asked. They exhaled slowly. "Everything you used to handle. It fell apart. The money, the organization, the respect. People left." I listened without interrupting. "We didn't realize how much you did," they continued. "We thought you would always be there." I felt something rise in my chest. Not anger. Truth. "I was always there," I said. "You just never saw me." They nodded. "We made mistakes," they admitted. "Big ones." The word mistakes felt too small for years of pain. They looked at me with something close to fear. "We need help," they said. There it was. The moment I had imagined 100 times. Them asking. Them needing. Them standing where I once stood. My heart pounded, not with excitement, but with weight. What kind of help? I asked carefully. They hesitated. We need you to come back. Even for a while. Just until things are stable. The world felt very still. Come back. The same words. Different moment. I closed my eyes for a second. Inside me, two paths opened. One led backward, to familiarity, to being needed, to the old role where my worth was measured by sacrifice. The other led forward, to the unknown, to growth, to a future where I belong to myself. I can't, I said quietly. Their face fell. You won't? They asked. I can't, I repeated. Because going back would mean becoming someone I no longer am. They stepped closer. You owe us, they said softly. After everything we gave you. I opened my eyes and met their gaze. You didn't give me, I said. You took from me. The words hung in the air. They looked away. That night, I went home shaken. Not because I doubted my decision, but because standing firm had cost me something. Even when you choose yourself, it can hurt. I sat in the dark, replaying the conversation again and again. Was I too harsh? Was I selfish? Then I remembered the nights I cried alone. The laughter. The silence when I needed support. And I knew. I had chosen right. The next few weeks were intense. Work exploded with new opportunities. More people wanted to partner with us. More programs. More responsibility. I was invited to speak again, this time at a much larger event. A national one. The idea terrified me. What if they see through me? I asked a colleague. They smiled. Then they'll see the truth, they said. And the truth is enough. I prepared day and night. I practiced until my voice no longer shook. Then, something unexpected happened. I received a message from someone I never thought would reach out. A former friend. I see you, the message said. I didn't understand before, but I do now. I stared at the screen, stunned. Slowly, the world was changing. People who once doubted me were watching, listening, learning. The day of the national event arrived. The room was huge. The crowd was bigger than anything I had faced before. As I waited backstage, my phone buzzed. A message from the past. You still have time to come back. This new life will fail. I felt a cold chill. They were trying one last time. I deleted the message. When my name was called, I walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding. The silence was loud. I took a breath and began to speak. And as I spoke, I felt it. Power. Not borrowed. Not given. Earned. But just as the crowd began to respond, something happened that made my heart stop. A voice interrupted from the back of the room. A voice I recognized. And in that moment I knew. The past had followed me again. The voice cut through the room like a knife. Wait. One word. Loud enough to stop everything. The crowd murmured. The lights felt hotter. My heart skipped so hard it hurt. I knew that voice. I had not heard it in a long time, but fear has a memory. My body reacted before my mind did. My fingers tightened around the microphone, and for a brief second, the old me tried to rise again. The woman who froze. The woman who apologized. The woman who shrank. But she did not win. I lifted my chin and looked toward the back of the room. There they were. Standing. The same person who had laughed when I walked out. The same one who told me I would fail. The same one who had just sent that message to my phone. Every eye in the room turned toward them. What is this about? The host asked, clearly confused. The person cleared their throat. I just think the audience deserves to know the full story, they said. Not just the version that makes her look good. A ripple of tension moved through the crowd. My heart pounded, but my mind was calm. This was it. This was the moment they had chased across rooms and months. The moment they thought would break me. The host looked at me, unsure. I nodded slowly. Let them speak, I said. Gasps filled the room. The person smiled slightly, like they had just won. They took a step forward. She's acting like a hero now, they said. But she left people behind. She walked away when things got hard. The words were sharp, familiar, designed to shame. I listened. Because I was no longer afraid of the truth. Is that so? I asked gently into the microphone. Yes, they replied quickly. She abandoned her responsibilities. I took a breath. Then I spoke. I didn't abandon my responsibilities, I said. I survived them. The room went silent. I continued. For years, I gave everything I had. My time, my strength, my voice. I turned slowly, making eye contact with the crowd. And when I could not give any more, I was laughed at and pushed out. A murmur spread through the audience. The person behind me tried to interrupt, but I raised my hand. I'm not finished, I said calmly. That calm frightened them more than anger ever could. I walked away because staying would have destroyed me. And choosing to live is not abandonment. The room was still. Some people nodded. Some looked shocked. The host stepped forward. Is this true? They asked the person. The person hesitated. That's not how I remember it, they said. I smiled softly. That's the thing about power, I said. It sounds different depending on who has it. Applause started. Slow at first. Then stronger. The person's face tightened. You're twisting the story, they snapped. No, I replied. I'm finally telling it. Security approached, unsure of what to do. The host made a decision. I think we've heard enough, they said firmly. This is not the place for personal attacks. The person protested, but they were escorted out. As the doors closed behind them, something inside me released. The past had spoken. And it had lost. I stood there, hands shaking now, not from fear, but from relief. The audience clapped. Some stood. I finished my speech. This time, every word felt grounded. When I walked off the stage, people stopped me. Thank you, one woman said, tears in her eyes. I needed to hear that, said another. I felt lighter than I had in years. Later that night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You embarrassed us. You could have handled it privately. You made enemies. I stared at the screen. Then I typed a reply. I made boundaries. I turned off my phone. The next morning, news spread quickly. Clips of the moment were everywhere. People shared my words. Commented. Argued. Some supported me. Some attacked me. But one thing was clear. I was no longer invisible. And with visibility came consequences. Because later that afternoon, I received a call that made my blood run cold. The voice on the line was calm. Too calm. We need to discuss something serious, they said. You may have put everything you've built at risk. My heart raced. What do you mean? I asked. There was a pause. You crossed someone very powerful. The line went quiet after those words. You crossed someone very powerful. I sat there holding the phone, my heart beating so loudly I could hear it in my ears. The room felt smaller, like the walls were slowly closing in. Who? I finally asked. The voice on the other end sighed, as if choosing words carefully. Someone with influence, they said. Connections. Money. A long memory. My mouth felt dry. Did I do something wrong? I asked. There was a pause. No, they replied. But doing the right thing doesn't always protect you. The call ended. I sat still for a long time, staring at my phone. So this was the price. Not laughter. Not insults. Silence. Threats. Pressure. The trouble did not come all at once. It arrived quietly. Meetings were suddenly postponed. Emails went unanswered. A project that had been approved was placed under review. People who used to greet me warmly now avoided eye contact. I felt the shift. One afternoon, I was called into a private meeting. The room was cold. The smiles were tight. "We've received concerns," one person said. "What kind of concerns?" I asked. "About your approach," another replied. "Your public statements." I understood immediately. "They think I spoke too much truth," I said calmly. No one laughed. "We're asking you to step back," they said. "For now." The words hit hard. Step back. Again. History trying to repeat itself. That night, doubt returned stronger than ever. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every choice I had made. Was I wrong to speak? Was I naive to believe power could be challenged without consequence? The old voice whispered again. "You should have stayed quiet." I sat up in bed. "No," I said out loud. I remembered the bench. The hunger. The laughter. Silence had never saved me. The next day, I made a decision. If they were going to push me out quietly, I would not disappear quietly. I gathered records. Emails. Messages. Approvals. Not for revenge. For truth. I requested a formal review. The room was tense when I walked in. They did not expect resistance. "You don't have to do this," someone warned. "I do," I replied. I spoke calmly, clearly, honestly. I did not attack anyone. I told my story again, this time with facts. By the end of the meeting, the silence was heavy. "We will get back to you," they said. I walked out unsure of what I had just set in motion. Days passed with no answer. The pressure grew. Then something unexpected happened. Support began to appear. A colleague sent a message. "We see what's happening. We're with you." Another followed. Then another. People who had been quiet found their voices. The truth has a strange way of doing that. But the powerful person was not finished. I received a message late one night. "You should have stayed in your place. This will not end well for you." My hands shook as I read it. Fear rose like a wave. Then anger. Then calm. I took a screenshot. And I saved it. The final meeting was scheduled. This was it. I walked into the room with my head high. They looked uncomfortable. "We've made a decision," the chairperson said. My heart pounded. "We believe external pressure influenced recent actions against you." The room was silent. "We are reversing the decision. You will continue in your role." Relief flooded me, but it was mixed with something else. Understanding. This fight was bigger than me. As I left the building, my phone buzzed. A new message. "You think you won?" I stopped walking. I looked up at the sky. "No," I whispered to myself. "I survived." But deep down, I knew one thing. The story was not over yet. Because power does not forgive easily. And the final test was still ahead. The return happened on a quiet morning. No announcements. No warnings. No laughter. Just a knock on the door of my office. I looked up, confused. "Come in," I said. The door opened slowly. And there they were. Not one. Not two. But all of them. The same people who laughed when I walked out. The same people who said I would fail. The same people who tried to pull me down when I stood up. They stood there awkwardly, unsure, smaller than I remembered. For a moment, no one spoke. Then one of them cleared their throat. "We heard you won," they said. I leaned back in my chair. "I didn't win," I replied calmly. "I built." They shifted uncomfortably. "We're struggling," another admitted. "Everything is falling apart." I studied their faces. No confidence. No laughter. No power. Only need. They had returned to me the same way I once returned to them, empty-handed and desperate. "What do you want?" I asked. They exchanged looks. "We want your help," the first one said. "You have influence now. Connections." There it was. The circle had closed. I stood up slowly and walked toward the window. I looked out at the city, the same city I once walked through with nothing but fear. I turned back to them. "I will help," I said. Hope lit their faces. "But not the way you think," I continued. Their smiles faded. "I will not come back," I said. "I will not work under you. And I will not be silent." They opened their mouths to argue. I raised my hand. "I will help by connecting you to resources," I said. "By giving advice when I choose. By supporting from a distance." I looked each of them in the eye. "But you will never control me again." Silence filled the room. Finally, one of them nodded. "We don't have a choice," they said quietly. I smiled. "No," I replied. "You don't." After they left, I sat down slowly. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from release. The power they never saw coming was not revenge. It was freedom. Weeks later, the initiative I led expanded nationwide. Stories like mine began to surface everywhere. People who had been laughed at, silenced, pushed aside, standing up. I was invited to speak again. And again. But this time, I spoke with peace. Because I no longer needed to prove anything. One evening, I received a message from an unknown number. "I was laughing that day," it said. "I see now that I was wrong." I did not reply. Some lessons do not need answers. If you are listening to this story and you feel seen, if you have ever been laughed at when you walked away, if you have ever been told you were nothing, remember this. Walking out is not weakness. It is often the first step to power. And sometimes, the best return is becoming someone they can never control again. Thank you for staying with this story. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications for more powerful and emotional stories. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from. Your voice matters here. Because your story might be the next one that changes everything.